So, and I think we're starting to get to this where, we talk about theoretical frameworks, and we mentioned earlier about methodology and methods, etc. And, in the course, there's a couple of lessons about, how you should explain, how you're going to do your research. So, that talks again to the methodology. And as we said earlier, within a methodology, you're going to have some methods and some instruments. Are you doing surveys? Are you doing interviews? What is the steps that you take? What is the research process that you're going to go through? But what I do find that people miss quite a lot, and I've had very good feedback on my courses previously, is that you need to position yourself before you just dive into methodology. Now, again, at a narrower level of research, I wouldn't spend too much time on this, but certainly at master's and definitely PhD, you need to position yourself philosophically. And you need to be sure in your own mind, even though it's an implicit choice that you skipped when you jumped into your choice of methodology, for your examiner and potentially your supervisor, you need to position yourself as being a participant in your research and part of the world within which this research is done. And therefore, how is knowledge created? How is it that you as a researcher do you influence your ability to objectively gather data? Are you an intrinsic aspect of the gathering of that data? And there are certain implications that those philosophical implicit mindsets that you have will determine not only your choice of methodology, but how you actually go about executing on that methodology. So again, I talk about that in some detail in the course. And just to go back to the previous question, there's a very good theoretical framework for that called an onion. And the theoretical framework, again, for positioning yourself, is that you, like an onion, you peel the outer layers before you get to the inner layer. And the inner layer is actually your methods. Are you doing case study? Are you doing mixed methods? But then the outer layers is the philosophy that you take. Are you doing inductive or deductive methods? Are you doing qualitative or quantitative? And you narrow down until you get into that detailed specific methodology. A lot of students jump in and say, I'm going to do case studies, or I'm going to do interviews, or I'm going to do a survey. Okay. Now, that might be an implicit choice based on your strengths, but you need to step back and think to yourself, why do I want to do a survey? Okay, I'm now going to start applying quantitative methods. All right, so I see the world through a quantitative mindset. I believe that numbers matter in the world. Or I'm doing interviews, and it's going to be unstructured data, and I need to choose a method like grounded theory because I feel that the world is very gray and that humans, have a very unquantifiable role to play, and that's important to my research. There's a question here. Some universities require a research proposal at the stage of applying for a postgraduate course. In the absence of a template, what more to cover over and above answering the 3 questions? So in the course, my answer to you would be go in there and have a look at my research proposal, because that goes into the sections and the subsections, and typically going to be introduction, literature review, methodology, and then a little bit about planning and your sort of next steps and approach to your degree. So remember, Makabongwe, that your final report is going to have mainly 5 big sections. Okay, so again, introduction, literature review, methodology, results, and then conclusion, discussion, etc. Results and conclusion, you haven't done the work yet, so that is going to come out of your study. But introduction, literature review, and methodology, you have some background reading to do. You can define the problem statement and the contribution and the significance of all of that. Your literature review is going to come out of your reading. And there is a section in the course on literature review, but really very quickly, let me break it down. Your literature review needs to take people on a journey from a broad sense and the context in your introduction then to the academic world, and narrow down. And I talk about Venn diagrams, and I say you could have 2 or 3 key topics, and then the overlap of those topics, inside that overlap of a couple of those key topics is where you want to do your study. So that's just very quickly then talking through some of the aspects that you might want to think about in terms of getting the detail of the different sections and subsections in your proposal. And I'll post a link right now to the course that you can go in and get a lot more detail in just now. Right, let's just have a look at a couple of questions. Cara says, what level of independence is expected with the different levels, honors, masters, etc., PhD? Yeah, very good question. And I think it is going to vary. And I think that's simply from a time perspective. So again, as we spoke about, you're going to have a different amount of time to complete, research at those different levels. And so the level of independence is going to be a function of how well the university thinks you can get through the work that you want to do in your research within that time. So if it's a matter of months in a proposal that you're doing for a module of a postgraduate diploma or even an honors level potentially, you may have not so much independence because the university obviously has a vested interest in getting you through. So that level of independence might be a lot less. Whereas if you get to master's and PhD, you've now got, let's say, 2 years in a master's, or maybe even a bit longer. And then in a PhD, you're going to have potentially 4 to 6 years, depending on how much time you're putting into it, whether it's full-time or part-time, etc. And so I would say the level of independence is going to increase, and rightly so, because you should have the flexibility to go and explore your field as a much more capable researcher. So the expectation is that as you go through honors, masters, and PhD, your abilities as a researcher is going to be improving. And so it's just like we learn to crawl, and then we walk, and then we run, and it's just that maturity as we grow as humans. So we will grow and develop increasing maturity and levels of skills as academic research. Tata says, is it always the case that a PhD dissertation should feed into a theory? No, it's not the case. So I can think of a couple of examples. So you could have case study research, for example, and case study research is going to look for patterns, I guess, potentially, either in one example or across a multiple of different data points. I would say that you'll struggle to make a contribution if you're not really explicitly assessing and testing an existing theory or producing and developing a new theory. So Tata, let's just deal with this very quickly. So an inductive method is going to give you a lot of independence. So to Cara's point just now, a lot of independence to go and create new theories. A deductive method is going to test an existing theory. So I think what you're talking to there, Tata, is feeding into a theory is where you're testing a theory. So you're testing the theory, like I mentioned, of rehabilitating juveniles in Zimbabwe requires these 3 focus areas. You're testing that theory. You're saying, well, actually, I've done some research and I found a 4th one, for example. So you're adding to that theory, or you could say those 3 are completely wrong. And let me tell you why. Because I've done the work, I've done the research, I've done the analysis, I've got the credibility in my field, and that was applicable during the 1980s. But now, in 20, 30 years later, these are the reasons why that theory needs to be updated, etc. So Tata, I would say there are some exceptions, but most definitely at a PhD level, there needs to be some theoretical linkages there as much as possible.